Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to Radiant Waves. I am Desiree Baccus, November 3 Delta Echo Zulu, and I am here today again to talk to you a little bit more about communications and public relations for amateur radio. Now, this topic that we are going to talk about today is going to build on to what we talked about last episode, which was kind of the basics. This goes a little bit deeper into what kind of communications that you can begin to craft for your organization, your club, or for amateur radio as a whole. Now, what I want to share with you today, transcends amateur radio. It's bigger than that. And this would be good for small businesses. This would be good for large businesses. This would be good for the national level, like ARRL as the National Association for Amateur Radio. At every level, we need to be able to tell stories, and that is how we communicate with our customers and the public as to what amateur radio is all about. And so what I have found in my career that I share with a lot of people, and I definitely wanted to add it here because I want you guys all to be able to come back to this episode and be able to speak to each of these. There's 10, 12, stories that are kind of the basics of crafting your story for your organization. And each of these stories does not need to come from the public relations manager. They just help facilitate to grab them, to document them, and to be able to share them with the community or your target base that you're trying to get, whether that's new members, your current membership, engagement, if that's trying to reach new markets, or or really targeting the historical the historical base of what amateur radio is and has been. So there's a place and a special focus for each one of those, and they all have a place and they all have an importance. So you need to make sure that you're speaking to each of those equally, but these are the stories that you can tell, okay? So what I always say is really, again, which I talked on the last episode when I was talking about the basics. Again, we're going to start with our values and our mission and our vision. So with your value, when you're talking about your club's value and your organization's values, this is not just your values that you guys have as an organization or that you have as a club, like we were talking about last episode. This is about what value are you? What value does your club bring? What is it that you provide to the community, and to whom do you provide it, right? And in what ways is it provided? So once you define that, it might be that we provide emergency preparedness communications in the event of an emergency. And who are you providing it for? You are helping Aries, or you are helping the established emergency management systems that are already in place in your local communities. List them, right? Okay, Littleton Fire Department, or this or that, list them and give them some credit too, right? And say, we aren't orchestrating this on our own. We are going under the guidance of their professional guidance, but we're here to assist them when and if they are needed. We have these capabilities. This is what we have. This is the value that we bring to our community. And we just want you to know that it's there, right? So that's the kind of the value that you're amplifying. And in what ways? We can do VHF, HF, this, that. We can stand up a repeater. We can, what value do you bring? Define it. And that is all one value story. So that's your value story for your organization and your club. So make sure that you help to define that. You might do that as a team. You can do that with brainstorming. and get ideas and what you want to convey and what you're ready to put out there. If things are half baked, like I have ordered 200 radios, you don't want to put that out there that they're available if they're not available yet. If you don't have them, if they're not charged, if you're not ready to use them, if you're not ready to be able to orient the people that you're loaning them to, then they're not ready to go. And you're not ready to release that information to the public that you have that available. So even if it's mildly available, right? So we have quick response vehicles, and they are equipped with communications equipment that we want to roll out. But they're fully functional. They're just not as nice as we want them to be, because we need to do some upgrades to them, put in some carpeting, put in some cabinetry, do those things. It's okay. If they're ready to be rolled out and you can loan them, then definitely add them to your list. Put them on your values, what you have available to you. So make sure that you are touting, again, what you provide to the community, who do you provide it to, and define in what ways you provide. Okay, that's your value story. The second story that you need to talk about is your vision story. Okay, so where is it that you guys are going? Right? So this is what you do today. This is all the amazing things that you do today. This is the things that you are doing to support your community. These are the events that you're doing. But where are you going? Where's that vision? And you can talk about vision in a couple of different ways, right? It could be within the next couple months. It could be within the next year. It could be within 5 years, 10 years. Think strategically out, because once you have a vision and you have a goal, then you can all have the same goal that you're working towards, right? So if you are a research club and you're doing radio astronomy, and you all are looking forward to being able to expand teaching to children and to schools and to get funding from the colleges and get buy-in and things like that. If you want that kind of stuff, have that strategic thinking for 5 years out, 10 years out. Where is the plan that you're going towards? And you can't do it all today, but how incrementally do we break that apart to get there? And so these are all part of the stories that you could tell. You could talk about the stories that you're doing today, tomorrow, the next day, things like that. Transparency in communications and in selling amateur radio and what we do as a community is huge, right? So if you are doing ballooning, high altitude ballooning, and you do that with students, or you do the hot air balloons where you're making contacts from your hot air balloons like they do in Albuquerque. These are all stories that need to be told. Parachute mobile, these guys that are jumping out of airplanes and they're doing contacts as they're plummeting to the ground. They're super exciting to watch. These things need amplification. And so more people need to know about it. Maybe you listening to this, podcast right now are thinking, I've never heard of parachute mobile. I've never heard of people doing this from hot air balloons. But that's my point exactly, right? I've never heard of a group of amateur radio operators going camping together outside of maybe Quartz Fest, if you've even heard of Quartz Fest, right? So, but this happens all the time, and we need to be able to amplify that and speak to that and share that within our communities. So in order to do that, where are you going, right? What are you looking forward to? Make sure that you can share that. Another story, so the third story that I would share with you, that I would encourage you to share with your community and your membership and the wider base, is your founding story. How did your club start? Who started it? When did it start? How long has it been active? Are you brand new and you're just standing up? And what's that look like? And have you been around since the 1930s? And it's a long legacy, and there's a history there, and there's what has the things that have happened throughout your history. You should know that. You should be able to document that, and that should be on your websites. Share that. It is important. People like to have the history of an organization and the group, there is security in that. There is knowledge in that. There is a lot of honored mentorship and elmership in that. That is a vital history that we want to capture and we want to keep. So, as we see in longer and bigger, older organizations, even huge ones. Now, I refer to NASA a lot, but that's my wheelhouse, right? So I worked at NASA for 15 years, so that's what I know. So if I lean into that quite a bit, forgive me. It's not that it's better than any other organization or anything else. It's just what I know. So, and as human beings, that's what we do, right? We lean into what we know. So using that as an example, we have people that have been working at NASA for years and years and years, and people that could have retired in their 50s but decide to continue working well into their 90s in different capacities, sometimes as our historians and things like that, and very valued information. But it's that succession planning, right? So even within our organizations, we don't know what's going to come up for our presidents, our vice presidents, our secretaries, our media specialists, our public relations officers. We don't know what's going to be in our future. So it's important to be able to share that history that we have out on our websites and kind of document that, because the next person coming in may not have to start from scratch, right? It's like, okay, well, this is where we have been. This is where we're at. We don't have to go off of one person's vernacular or their recollection of it. It's more holistic, right? And so you can add stories to it. You can add personal flair to it and things like that. Oh, I remember when Bob did X, Y, or this or that. But when you have that base, that is the history that is so vitally important. So, it's one of the reasons why when ARDC documented the library for us and put so many resources, scanned resources out there for us to be able to archive and look at through their archive, it is just a wonderful resource for us to lean into, all of us in the amateur radio community. It's just such a blessing. Being able to look back to the very first QST magazine, or things like that. I have a QST magazine here. This is my oldest one. It's from January of 1927. And so, but it goes way back to 1915, right? I mean, I have a photocopy that I've made the photocopies of, and I've, stapled it together for that. But knowing your history is important, and it isn't as important for your organization as it is for, your club and yourself and new members coming in. These are vital stories that we need to tell. So we need to archive them. We need to gather people's information, their stories, their ideas, and we need to document them. It's so vitally important. And I would definitely say that that's important. So make sure that you do a founding story. That was the third one. So we have values, we have vision, and then we have founding. Now we're on to your customer's story. Now this is important. Some people don't like the word customers, and you can call them whatever you want. But for me and for this video, I'm just going to refer to them as customers. So whatever your vernacular is, you use that. But customers is really who you serve and how you do it, right? So who is it that you are serving? The community, the rural areas here in Colorado. We have many peaks and valleys and things like that. We're not like California, where I came from, where out in the Mojave Desert, where everything was very flat. Arden Network worked really well out there. It doesn't work so well here. We don't have that line of sight that connects people that can do Arden so well. But out in the Arkansas plains, or in Kansas, or in areas of Texas, that might be very, very useful. And so who is it that you serve? What communities do you serve? What does your region look like? What is your blessings and curses, right? So with us, with the peaks and valleys and everything else, it's kind of a mixed bag, right? We have 58 14ers here, mountains that are over 14,000 feet tall. And that's kind of a mixed blessing for us. So in California, when a repeater obviously is up on a high mountain peak, there's vegetation and it burns up. And you have to have a really robust repeater system in order to keep them safe and secure. Or you have to have something that can be deployed very easily in the aftermath of something going down that can relink that system in order to keep that up. And so it's a little bit different. Whereas out here, because our mountain peaks are so high up, they're above the vegetation line. So there might be fires that come up and, but it still might just do a ring around the thing that might sustain us. So you have to really know your region and be able to define that. Who are your customers and how do you do it? How do you serve them? Along that same lines, but it's a totally different vein, for your customers is also having a tutorial page on your websites that is your feedback that you've gotten and solicit that. When you have an event, don't waste the opportunity to put out there for people to voluntarily do a survey. Put them on clipboards, throw them in front of the cafeteria and the tables. Ask some generic questions and let people answer them. You're going to get vital information on how to proceed forward within the next year and things like that. One example that I have is we have several core competencies in one of the clubs that I represent. And so something that's very, very vital and important to us, that's important to our core values and our mission, is education and outreach, as it is to many groups, okay? And we offer that free to the community, internally to amateur radio operators, but also externally to everyone within our community. And when we do that, it is so important because we're getting subject matter experts to come in, give these talks. We archive it. We have a great archive, great resources. And when we did our survey at our annual event, we found out that there was a large swath of people that had never even heard of Arnhem University. So we knew at that point that we need to do better at amplifying that, right? If it's our core capability that we want to give and serve to our communities, then we need to be better at amplifying that and sharing that with our communities. When you do that, post people's comments, give them an opportunity in that survey to write down what is that they think you're doing excellent at, that they appreciate you and your club for, right? The Boy Scouts, you're doing the Jamboree on the Air, make sure that you send a survey afterwards to that Club Scout leader or the division leader of that, organization, whether it's all of your state or your county or whatever that is. If you're working with Aries, same thing. If you're working with, any of the other sister groups or brother groups that we have, other clubs, get their buy-in, find out, what their thoughts are, and then post it, on your Facebook or your, not just your Facebook page, but definitely on your website page, right? So you could share it on social media as well, but definitely more important for your website pages. So if you ever go for a grant or something like that, and you're pointing people back to your website, they can see, people's buy-in. When you offer for someone to, leave a donation, buy me coffee, do whatever, also leave them a place where they can leave you feedback, right? Solicit that feedback. They can leave it in comments below for your podcast or whatever. However you're working your public relations outreach, make sure that you give an avenue for people to voluntarily give their opinions. Now, you don't have to put out every opinion that's out there, right? You can lock them down to say, let me read them first. Let me approve them first, right? So you don't get somebody spamming you that has nothing to do with amateur radio. Nefarious actors will infiltrate everything if they possibly can. So, safeguarding is not necessarily a bad thing, but just know that you can at any time drill that down and then put whatever you want out there. Or you can, respond back to people that may have had a negative experience. And how do we rectify that? How do we invite you to the next club event and change your mind about us? Those kind of things. So we are the front lines of friendship, fellowship, camaraderie, all that for our organizations. So keep that in mind. Do your customer story. It's very important. Both ways, right? So keep that in mind. The next one is your partnership story. You need to talk about, who do you work with? What other organizations do you partner with? How do you partner with them? Do you partner with, another organization to do a special event that they do, and you offer support, manpower, or equipment? Do you partner with another club to provide repeater service in your area? Do you collaborate with ARRL as a special, a special event or a special club station? That kind of a thing. Are you a nonprofit? Are you, collaborating with your communities in order to maintain and keep that status, right? Are you on your local statewide campaign for, charity fundraising, or a national nonprofit organization that does fundraising for all nonprofits? Things like that. Who do you partner with, and how do you partner with them? So that's important. Do you work with your fire department? List how you've partnered with them and in what ways. Do you teach classes? Do some of your members go out and teach, basic first aid, or work with 1 day of amateur radio training in their CERT classes? How do we amplify amateur radio outside of those things? A lot of CERT classes don't offer amateur radio, but I can tell you from my personal experience, I got into CERT when I was in the Bay Area, and I was working up at NASA Ames Research Center, and we were living down in Gilroy, which was, 2 hours of a commute one way, and loved the area, beautiful people, very much enjoyed our time up there. But I was greatly concerned. My kids were starting junior high and high school, and they needed to be connected to the resources if anything should happen, a natural disaster or something. And so I got into CERT, and they had 1 day of amateur radio. And that was vital for connecting me to the amateur radio community. And that changed the course of my entire life. You don't know what seeds that you're going to throw out there, and how that might change somebody or connect them or bring them into the fold. And so here we were in the Bay Area, and we didn't have any family around us. I was used to that, but my husband wasn't. He was very tight with his family. And then all of a sudden, the amateur radio community just picked us up and became our family. And that's what I want to see happen everywhere, right? That's why I'm so passionate about amateur radio. It's much more than a certificate on a wall that you hang up, or that you've worked all states, or you've done all this DXing and you have all these things. Those are wonderful, and they are exciting, and they are thrilling to be able to prove your professional prowess in amateur radio. But beyond that, what really connects us is that we are all amateur radio operators, and that we are all licensed ham operators. We all have we've passed our tests in order to do that. We've put forth the effort. We believe in the community of amateur radio, and it is that honored society, that brotherhood, that family that really excites me. You are all my family. You are my people. And if you were ever in need, we would be there in a heartbeat. It's just that simple, right? I already know that our values and our core beliefs are basically the same. We have a thread between us that grounds us, and that's important. So who do you partnership? Is it your local high schools? Are you going into your local high schools and a couple of your members are mentoring their engineering club? Are you going into the Boy Scouts or the Girl Scouts and helping them obtain their radio badges? Are you going into your local government and working with your representatives in your state or in your local city in order to support them and show them what kind of events we have, or just to get our annual proclamations done? Those kind of things. Amplify those things and connect people to amateur radio by just doing our proclamations each year for our ARRL's field day. That is a way to connect our representatives to the importance and the continued interest of amateur radio in our areas. Don't be afraid to reach out and do that. And start doing that 2 months in advance. It takes sometimes, 6 to 8 weeks in order to get that approved. So, if June's coming up, maybe you should start that in April or May. So definitely, those are things. How do you partner and who do you partner with, and what events do you do and how do you do it? So, think about those things, and they don't all look the same. So amplify that. Okay. So the next thing that I would like to talk about is a recruiting story. You should always know that we are able to grow as a community in amateur radio. So a lot of our memberships, we are kind of striking out in the same areas, and sometimes we need to amplify that. Where are we looking? Do we take this out to other things like, the X Games and talk about amateur radio there? Do we go to events like, NASCAR races and talk about it there? Do we go to, our overlanding trips and talk about it there with those groups? Do we go out and share it with the 4-H groups? Do we go out and we talk about it to, our children's dance recital classes and the mothers and the fathers that are there watching their children? Do you expose amateur radio in other facets? Make sure you amplify why they would want to be a part of this community. And what does that look like within your own club, right? And so that looks different for everybody. For me, it's definitely personal. To me, it's personal. I want you to be my extended family. I want you to know that you have a place here, that you and your wonderful uniqueness and everything that you bring to amateur radio is exactly what makes us stronger, what makes us greater, what makes us more inventive, what makes us more, inclusive, and makes us push the boundaries of what is possible today. And so I want to bring in everybody's point of view, and I want to bring in everybody in amateur radio, and I want to share what I have found to be this magical cure-all in my life. I want it to be that for somebody else, right? So I really don't feel like that's a limiter for anybody. Not age, not ability, not anything. But what is it that drives people to your organization? What is it that is your key? That may not even be the key that is the same for all of the organizations that I support, right? That's just mine. That's me personally. So me going out and amplifying that is not a big deal. Me talking to somebody on an airplane that I'm sitting next to for a 6-hour flight across the country, I can talk to them about amateur radio, and I can tie it back to them in any way, shape, or form because I'm passionate about it. Now, you don't have to go that extent, but I would genuinely say just start with sprinkles, right? Just sprinkle it into your conversations. You don't have to have full-on discussions about it or things like that, but start getting comfortable with spreading that to other people, and that is going to be a part of your recruiting story. That really becomes why does someone want to become an amateur radio operator? It's not just about talking to people verbally, right? If you've got mic fright and you don't want to put your voice out there to somebody, we have tons of digital modes. And everyone that says, gets, digital modes, oh, it's ruining amateur radio. Amateur radio has been evolving and stepping up and growing to new opportunities since its inception. That's the basis of amateur radio. So we need to reframe this, right? It is that inventive reimagining the possibilities of what amateur radio is what makes amateur radio so freaking great. And so we need to be able to amplify all of it. Parks on the air, get people outside and get them more active. Whatever it is, get that out there. Share that, right? I would love to see a developer create a game that teaches people how to do amateur radio in a fun, interactive video game kind of way. It would reach a whole different level of people, right? But there's somebody out there that has that skill set. And when you mirror the skill set with the passion, anything is possible. There's tons of things out there that are still never been done, that we want to do, that we want to see happen, that can be done. We just need to put our brains together and we need to figure it out. And we can do it. So you never know if that person's going to be that for you. If you're in an area that doesn't have as great of funding, right? My husband grew up in a small little rural town in the middle of the Mojave Desert, and not a lot of scholarship opportunities for these kids, right? And so talk to them about the scholarship opportunities with amateur radio. It's phenomenal. I mean, it's unreal. Where else can you have hundreds of scholarships available to anyone wanting to further their education? Now, I mistakenly was thinking years ago when I got into amateur radio, and this was only 9 years ago, so I'm a baby compared to everybody else, right? And yet I'm still ancient compared to people that are getting into it today. So with that, when I got into it and I heard about the scholarships and I saw them and I thought, oh, that would have been so neat to have known about this when I was in high school, or so neat if my kids could have, benefited from this and become amateur radio operators or things like that when they were in high school and thinking about going to college. Well, my husband encouraged me to apply, and I was like, they're not going to give it to some old lady. They're not going to give it to me to finish my education. He's like, it's important to you, and you're passionate about amateur radio, just put it in. And I got a scholarship. There's not just one large scholarship. There's tons of them. So please go out there and look at it, exemplify that, share that with people. When I got my amateur radio scholarship a couple years back, the interesting thing that I was told at that time was they had more money than they had people to apply for the scholarships. It's one application, and it puts you in for all of them. It's not like you have to put in your application for each individual one and you have to pick which one you're going after. You put in your information, they will go through it, and they will find out where you fit into that thing to get the support that you need and you deserve. That's one of the hugest things that we can offer people within this community. ARDC and ARRL, that program is such an underutilized, uncapitalized benefit to our community. And so for all these Eagle Scouts, these Boy Scouts, these Girl Scouts that are getting these awards and doing these things, this is important, right? If you have a collegiate club, speak to them, right? If they're going for their masters or their bachelors or their associates, it doesn't matter. If they're 16 and going to college early, or if they're 21 and going to college, or they're 50 and going to college. If you have a desire to further your education, amplify that scholarship opportunity that we have within amateur radio as our community. Maybe your club has scholarships available through them, right? Maybe you had an angel investor that gave you their equipment when they passed away. You know, what offerings do you give to your community? You know, do you want to give your rig to an organization that you know does a lot of public outreach with people? Maybe you want to give your rig that you absolutely love to donate it to a nursing home, and have amateur radio operators that go in once a week and share the love of amateur radio with, you know, that community. You know, what is it? Who are your customers? What is your recruiting story? Who are you trying to pull in, right? How do you pull somebody into your organization? Why do they want to be a part of our community? So think about that, try to amplify that, and that is a recruiting story that you need to also add to your list of stories to tell. The next one is your leadership philosophy. And that is, why do you do what you do, right? Why do you have a program where you take in rigs and get solicitations for your equipment or your POTA stuff, and if anything should happen to you, succession planning as to where that goes, or why do you do the outreach for the schools, and why do you take the time to go in and do fox hunts or explain concepts to teenagers? Or why do you, as a collegiate program, let's say your college has a collegiate program and your group goes out and works with the Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts in order to teach them how to get their badge, even if it's just for Jamboree on the Air and it's one time a year. Why do you do that? What is that leadership quality that you are exemplifying? That is so important for you to be able to be leaders within your community. That's what amateur radio is all about. If you weren't wanting to be a leader, I'm not sure that you would get into amateur radio. There's so many other things, right? Why did you go to amateur radio rather than CB or GMRS? What drew you to this level of service, right? What does that look like? What is your leadership qualities? And be able to share those leadership, that leadership story with others. How are you leading? Why are you leading? What code does that put forward that your organization is modeling for others, right? So we have nothing against the GMRS community. We have nothing against CB. It is just what it is. It's just the fact that we are leaders in our field or our avenue of communication, and with that comes a different level of respect. And so we respect each other, we respect ourselves, we have self-confidence, we know our abilities, we're confident in our abilities, and we're able to share that with others. I'm not saying that you're confident in every aspect of amateur radio, okay? Or that you know everything about Smith's charts, or you know everything about whatever. I'm not saying that. You know enough about amateur radio to be able to share that with somebody else and communicate your love and your excitement for this community and what it brings you to. You had to take a test to be here. You passed it. I don't care if you passed it by one point, one question, you passed it. If you have an amateur radio license, you're a part of this community, and you have the opportunity to grow and to learn and to expand. And just because you get an extra doesn't mean that you don't have more room to grow and more room to expand and more things to wrap your arms around and be excited about. If you're willing to open yourself up, then the opportunities are endless, endless. So that is, something that you need to be able to share, is that recruiting story. What does that look like? What is that leadership philosophy that you guys have? How are you leading others? What does that look like? The next one is your case for change. This one you can use or you don't have to. A lot of people throw it to the wayside. I think it's vitally important. Why? You need to be able to share the story of why you can't stay where you're at. Why do we need to keep growing? Why do we need to keep evolving? Why do we need to be learning? Why do we need to keep, what is the reason that we are embracing the digital modes? It's not just because we have people that are deaf or are, there's many opportunities. They still need to communicate. People want to communicate. Maybe you're a radio broadcast engineer and you're out there and you have to talk all day long. Maybe you're a manager and you're in every freaking meeting there is from sun up to sundown. And you get home and the last thing you want to do is talk to another soul. You just need some downtime. Digital modes allows you to connect to other people, still allows you to collect those awards, do those things, and have that mental break too, right? It's still stimulating, it's still exciting, those kind of things. CW, same thing, right? So one is not better than the other. We just keep evolving, and we need to keep evolving. If amateur radio is going to sustain long term, you have to evolve. Look at all of the companies that we've had in the world that don't evolve and they go by the wayside. Kodak, big, huge companies that didn't evolve with the changing of the times. Times change. Today doesn't look like the same era, the same century that you were born in. And the next century is going to look totally different than it is today. But if we don't evolve with it, we will die. And our hobby will die with it. And that is what is exciting to me about amateur radio. It always evolves. It always changes. It always steps up. That's why it's so important to document the history, right? To know the history and see how we've grown, how we've expanded, how we've done all these things, and then step up to it. What's the next horizon that we don't know yet? How do we get there, right? It's that inventive spirit. A lot of times we think that it's places like NASA, or it's places like Google, or it's Silicon Valley that all the innovation happens in the world, and then it trickles out to the rest of us. That's BS. It happens in garages. All the stories of Silicon Valley, it started in people's garages. People tinkering with things and getting the first computers up and running, and the story of Steve Jobs and Woz, and all that fun stuff. These are inventive people, and that is what amateur radio is. Why do you think they're always tinkering in their garages or doing their Go kits, and nobody's Go kit looks the same? Why is it that our antenna shootouts, everyone has different things, for their deployments of their situations and their things? Why is it that we have thousands of radios or antennas or different things that we've tried and bought new things and, it's trial and error. It's exciting. And when you find something that works or something that works for you, right? So I absolutely love the buddy pull. I absolutely love the Wolf River coil. I absolutely love, there isn't like, ICOM. I love ICOM. I love Yaesu. I love, even Baofeng has its purpose and its wonderfulness in our community. We have turned into a society of teamism where it's one or the other, right? Amateur radio is about all of it. It's a holistic thing. And that's what's so vitally wonderful about us, is that we can integrate, that we are open, and that we're sharing, and that we know how to transcend different things and make them all work together. And so that is a story, a case for change. Why can't we stay where we're at? And that story needs to be shared as well. So that's important. The next one is our strategy. How are we going to get there? So now that we have talked about our case for change and why we can't stay where we're at, how are we going to get to that vision? How are we going to get there? What is the plan to get there? Now, just because you put it out there and just because you have a plan doesn't mean that that is the set in stone way to get there. As we know, plans change. It just is what it is. But when you have a course and you have a plan and it is documented and you kind of have things thought out, you have risk management done. You kind of know that, well, if this happens, then I can do this. Or if that happens, I can do this. That's natural in amateur radio, right? That's an emergency preparedness part of amateur radio. We don't just have one backup solution in our car. If we should get stranded in a blizzard or things like that, we have multiple ways and different backup solutions, because what if the battery that was charged is no longer charged? Do we have, what kind of solutions do we have? What can we do? How can we invent something or create something? Or what will we do in that situation? Will we climb to the highest mountain and, get to the tallest tree? Or, how would we do that? What are our options? And so talking about that and sharing that strategy, I think is an important story to tell as well, right? What is the risk assessment of your plans? What happens when your clubhouse gets flooded because of a torrential rain? What are your contingency plans? How would you, bring out RVs? So-and-so is going to bring out this, and that one's going to bring out this generator, and where are your resources, and, that kind of a thing. That's important. So share your strategies, your strategy stories for your clubs and your organizations. That's really a good thing. Obviously, there's a marketing story. So obviously that's where we are today. Public relations, communications, it's all about marketing. But how are you serving? When you're talking about your marketing story, we're talking about how your club or your organization or amateur radio serves a higher purpose, right? The greater good. You're talking a very high level story for marketing, and that's what I'm talking about. So how are you leading by example? How does amateur radio serve at that highest level for humanity? And that could be not just for humanity, that could be also for how we utilize amateur radio for coordinating livestock in a evacuation scenario for emergencies. How do we gather people's pets that had to be left behind because they were working and they worked 2 hours away? What kind of resources do people have? You're saying, yes, you can go here. You can talk to me. I will pick up your animals. I will break your dang window to get your beloved pup out of that house, and we're going to take them to this county fairgrounds, and this is the location that they're going to be. This is how we're going to coordinate the need for hay for the horses that were rescued. This is how we're going to get food, dog food and cat food for the pets that were rescued. How are we going to convey the higher good that we are doing with amateur radio? And like I said, it doesn't just have to be for humanity's sake. It could be for our beloved animals as well, our livestock, our businesses. How do we mobilize? How will amateur radio operators go door to door and knock door to door and let our community know that a fire is coming through and we need to get out right now? I think of the lives that were lost in the Camp Fire in Paradise, California, several years ago, and the houses that were lost and the community that we lost. But I also think in that same breath, how much could have been lost even more if it wasn't for amateur radio operators going door to door, serving their communities, helping people get out. The teachers in the buses hunkered down with the kids in the school buses with fire raging all around them, not knowing if they were going to survive or not. I mean, these are stories that need to be shared. It is that marketing story of serving the greater good. The deaf amateur radio operator who got his license a month before and was on the bands, and two amateur radio operators that were avid preppers that were fully equipped in their vehicle, had gone out in the snow, and their vehicle spun out, and they got out. They had a winch. They knew how to hook it up to a tree, no problem. They started the winch to get it out of, the situation that they were in and correct their situation. And the vehicle slid and it spun and it ended up breaking a guy's leg. And the other one had to take the HT unit that he had and go to the top of a mountain because he couldn't get any kind of signal from where he was at. He went to the top of the mountain, hiked up, and was able to barely hear an operator states away from him. And that was this deaf operator. And they were fully capable hearing people on the line too, but it was so degraded that it was like you couldn't get out a full sentence. And because that deaf operator was so used to adapting to communicate, that he just on the fly created a system. One kerchunk for yes, two kerchunks for no. Just key up the mic once, twice, asked him about a series of yes or no questions, was able to figure out not only what the problem was, but where they were at and get them help. And those operators very much accredited them, that operator was saving their life. And that is a vital, important story to be able to tell. That's marketing, right? Those true life things that have happened, amplify those. Why and how does amateur radio serve the greater good? That could be within your own club, or it could be as the whole for the amateur radio community. And so that is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about marketing. Those are the stories that need to be told, that need to be shared. Talk about Hedy Lamarr and, her, track record and her history of being a, debutante, beautiful, Hollywood actress and, superstar in that realm, but also being pivotal for Wi-Fi. And how does that correlate? Those are stories that need to be told. That's marketing, right? The greater good, the bigger story, the things that what amateur radio and, values and the technologies and things like that. How does it link? So think about that for marketing. Another one is sales, right? So we think of sales as what's going to drive membership and this and that and so forth and so on. No, it's marketing. But sales definitely has an important role to play. And so you should also have a sales story that you know how to amplify and share with others. And that is, what do you offer and how do you make that available to people that are interested in using it, right? So do you have Go Kits that people could borrow and use and when they're going camping on a camping trip? Do you have things that they could check out for, as a group or things like that? What do you have? What do you offer? And how do people access what you offer? So don't just list a bunch of stuff and then not tell them how to get there or make it not accessible. Make sure that it's accessible. Make sure that they know how to obtain the services or the things that you're offering, even if that's just camaraderie. If you have a shut-in within your community that just wants companionship and you have an amateur radio operator that's willing to visit them once a month and bring their HT unit and connect them to the rest of the world, that is an offering. That is a free service that you are doing for the greater good. That is a connection to humanity that we need. And we don't just need it today, but it's going to grow exponentially as our demographic gets older. It just is what it is. We need to stay connected, and how are we going to do that? Do you have somebody that can get PVC, the acrylic, shelving units, and you can drill holes to the knobs and controls for our aging operators that are becoming hard of sight, but still want to be able to, do amateur radio contacts, but don't have, are losing that kind of ability, and it's keeping them from doing that. How can we amplify simply ways to aid them in doing that? Do we have a new amateur radio operator who is blind and just needs help setting up that rig in their, apartment or whatnot? How do we get that set up for them? What kind of resources do we have? Do we have a new female operator who really wants to do amateur radio, really wants to have amateur radio? Do we have other female operators that are willing to go to her house and aid her in setting up her station and her rig, or helping her get on the air? Do we have a young man that's coming in that would like to partner with another young individual to go out to Parks on the Air and see how that's done? And how do you sign up, and how do you make the calls, and how do you activate a site, and how do you do those things? Do we have partnerships available? And that's all part of your sales. So have that sales story, be able to sell what you do and your organization and what amateur radio does, for our communities. The next one is a communication story, which is going to sound very similar to a marketing story, right? So, but you just covered marketing. Isn't marketing and communications and partnerships, isn't all that kind of the same thing? Not necessarily. Okay, communications is, how do you amplify amateur radio? How do you encourage collaboration amongst your team members? How do you propagate contacts, new contacts or new markets for exposing amateur radio to other people? That's a communication story to me. Communication is, how do you bring people that wouldn't necessarily be a part of amateur radio into the community? Here's a prime example. I have aging parents, like a lot of us do, and I want them to stay connected to their communities for amateur radio. There are amateur radio operators, HT units out there now, ICOM, lots of different ones that have them out there that you can get that's just listen only. So when I first started this, I got them an HT unit, right? An inexpensive one that they could turn on and they could, do these things. And I said, don't touch this button. You don't have a license. Don't talk on it. Don't mess with those things. Yes, they could put cardboard over it just like they do a remote or something like that, whatever the case may be. But now they have ones where you can just listen to the bands just like you do a scanner, right? And now you're exposing somebody to it. And so if you do that with a neighbor or a parent, something like that, you keep them connected to this community. And then after they've been listening to a net for so long, all of a sudden now they want to check into the nets, right? Even the GMRS things might be able to, start somebody in those kind of realms and to listening and to wanting to be more active. How do you pull them from GMRS into the amateur radio community? How do you convince them that this is very, very cool and that you want to get your license? I had somebody share with me at a conference this last week. I was at a AFN conference, which is for our disabled community, and sharing how we can bring the disabled into amateur radio. And how we do that, they really have this adaptive quality. But one of the gentlemen that I was talking to, he was like, oh my gosh, I have a 6-year-old that I got a GMRS radio and we love it. And we've been able to stay communicating with our family. And my 6-year-old already knows how to keep, she's better at it than her mother. And I was like, that's perfect, because she's a sponge. Start her with doing the phonetics, right? And saying her name with phonetics and checking in phonetically. He's like, I've got to show you this video of just an audio clip of her checking in with her fellow friends in her little neighborhood at 4 o'clock every day. They do a little mini net. And I was like, that's freaking adorable. Absolutely adorable. And so you encourage those things, show them how to do a net, have them do those things. And as they progress, bring them into the amateur radio community and say, with amateur radio, you can do this. Now you can support your communities. Now you can go out and be a resource for communications at your local parades. You can do those things. How do you grow that excitement that started as a seed from that community into our community? How do you bring them into the fold and grow them, right? It's not one or the other. It's precept upon precept, step upon step. How do you teach kids to build their own ciphers and communicate through their own Morse code? How do they learn Morse code? How do they be able to communicate that as a family? Even if that's, the parents leaving little dots and dashes messages for their kids, and their kids have to figure it out before they go to school. Oh, I want to see the message that mom left for me in my lunchbox, whatever the case that may be. How do we propagate that and grow that until they're of such an age that they can take a test, right? So think about, do you offer within your classes or in your clubs, how to become a technician, the technician courses, the initial courses, or the general courses, or the extra courses, in order to get that next step up for your licensing. So that is communication, amplifying that. How do we promote it? How do we connect people to it? That's communications. And so I hope you got something out of this. This is a lot of that stuff. When I talked about in the last episode about the basics, I was talking, you just start with 3 things. So don't get overwhelmed with this, right? 3 things. I'm going to go back over those real quick because that's really, really important for your group, which is you share information, you inspire people, and then you make connections, and how you make them connected, that communications piece. And then above and beyond that, you would, connect them to the greater good. These things, these stories that I'm telling you today, this is a bigger picture. You can use that in posts on social media. You can use this on your websites in order to grow your membership, or sharing it within your communities, whether you're going to a conference or a fest. These are things that connect you with other people. These are just stories that your organization be able to share with others, that can grow your base and continue you on a thriving trajectory that's, onward and upward of anything that you've ever thought of before. And so it's all about communicating our things. Again, it's values, vision, your founding story, your partnership story, your recruiting story, your leadership philosophy, your case for change, your strategy, your marketing story, your sales story, and your communication story. These are all things that you can do, whether it's in print media with sharing with our magazines that are internal to the amateur radio community, externally to Field and Stream, or whatever it is that you're reading. How do you connect it to that? These are all stories that could be amplified together, separately, but I hope this helps you to have more content, to speak to other amateur radio operators, to be able to share who you are, what you are, how unique you are, and your organization, amplify it, and it grows us all. So know that this work that you are putting in is so vital to amateur radio as a whole, as a bigger picture. And we appreciate absolutely everything that you do. You are the golden thread that often gets overlooked, but that shines in the light. and you're so vitally needed. Thank you for being a part of this, series, and for listening. And please leave a comment below. Please support, this if there's something that you would like to see covered. Definitely ask me, and I will do my best to do that. You can always reach out to me at any time. I'm on QRZ. Feel free to look me up and reach out in any way. And I would love to have a conversation with you. Let this not just be a one-way conversation. Again, feel free to come back to this at any time and check those out. I'll try to put in chapters for you so it'll be easy to get to that next thing that you want to do or need to do for your group. And again, what doesn't work for you, toss out. What does work for you, keep and run with. And if you have any further ideas, any other stories that I haven't captured, please let us know in the comments below. All right, talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.